Ariel, welcome to the program. How are you?
I'm doing great, Dan. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to talk to you.
Well, glad to have you. Which was a bigger upset? Conor McGregor losing or Holly Holm losing?
Oh, that is a tough question. I think, you have to factor in a few things. Conor McGregor was moving up 2 weight classes. He was fighting a guy who took the fight on 11 days' notice, and that plays in Nate Diaz's hand as well. I think, given the way the fight went with Miesha Tate and Holly Holm, I side towards Miesha Tate. I felt like Holly Holm was just a superior fighter, and she was 2 minutes away from winning that fight, and the way in which she lost was rather dramatic. So I'm going to actually side with Miesha Tate on this one.
Was it a good night for the sport?
I've been asked that question like 20 times in the last 48 hours, and I'm actually siding with yes, because there's 2 reasons why I feel like it was. Short term, you were just talking about the box office. Third highest gate in UFC history. They ticket sales equaled up to over $8 million, which is the third best in their entire history. So short term, great night. Pay-per-view sales trending over $1 million, all that stuff. And then long term, people are saying, well, now Conor McGregor is no longer a star. Holly Holm is no longer a star. And I disagree. Conor is still the featherweight champion. So he's still a pillar of that organization. He's going to come back in a few months. And I think the way in which he handled the loss actually makes him a more likable and bigger star now. And Holly Holm is going to come back. The Rousey fight is still there. It's still a sellable rematch. And Miesha Tate, Ronda Rousey 3, with the new storyline of Miesha Tate being the champion, is fascinating as well. So I actually think it's not that bad, and people are making too big of a deal of that.
You talked to Conor McGregor after the loss. What kind of mood did you find him in?
You see, Conor McGregor has put out the blueprint as to, A, how to become a huge star, B, how to become a massive box office draw, and C, how to deal with a loss. I mean, the way in which he dealt with that loss really put out the blueprint, in my opinion, how every athlete, in MMA, outside of MMA, should handle losses. I often say that losses in MMA don't mean as much as people like to make them out to be. And the way in which he showed up to the press conference, he talked to the media, he talked to Joe Rogan in the cage. He said, look, I took a shot. I'm not gonna apologize for that. I'm gonna keep coming. All the people who, are dancing on my grave, here's a one-finger salute for you. I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to still make money. That's perfect. Ronda hid from the cameras. Ronda didn't go to the press conference, and she received a lot of hate for that. Conor played it perfectly, in my opinion.
How does Ronda Rousey factor into all this now?
I actually think that this expedites her return because Ronda beat Miesha Tate twice, and she has a tremendous amount of confidence when fighting Miesha Tate. So she was probably watching or hearing about the results and thinking, you know what? We were talking about me coming back in November. Maybe I'll come back a little sooner. Maybe it makes more sense for me to come back because, in my opinion, the biggest winner of the night was actually Ronda Rousey because she knows she's already beaten Miesha Tate twice. She has those feathers in her cap. A lot of people, including myself, thought 9 times out of 10, Ronda loses to Holly Holm. But against Miesha, she just has her number. So now Miesha's the champion with that new storyline that she's the belt holder, and Ronda's trying to get the belt. That's a huge draw for the UFC. Don't sleep on that. I know a lot of people are just sort of jumping on the bandwagon and know about the Holly Holm Ronda Rousey feud, but Ronda Rousey Miesha Tate is really a bigger feud in many respects for the UFC. So I actually think she was one of the big winners of the night because now she knows, all right, the champion is someone I've beaten twice. This is actually really good for me.
Could big fights be on network TV someday?
Yeah, well, there's 4 fights on Fox every year, and there's a whole bunch of them on Fox Sports 1. The mainstream discussion has often been brought up in our sport. Are we mainstream? Is what happened on Saturday night with Nate Diaz swearing a bunch on TV and the blood and all that? Is that good? And what I say is, every major outlet covers the UFC. All the big fights, when there are real big ones, everyone's talking about it. It was on the cover of Sports Illustrated last week. Conor McGregor was on the cover. If there's a sector of society that doesn't like the idea of 2 men or women fighting in a cage, good for them. Enjoy baseball, enjoy basketball. We don't have to be loved by everyone. And for a long time, there's been this thought that, we have to be mainstream and in every household and have everyone talking about us. Why? They're doing just fine without it. There are people who are jumping on board. There are people who love it, and there are some who don't. That's fine. Not everyone has to love cage fighting. So right now, I think the UFC is in a great spot. The Fox deal is coming up in 2 years. They're probably going to make a whole lot more money. domestically and, of course, worldwide as well. The UFC is not dying, and I love seeing these, Monday morning quarterbacks come out after a fight on Saturday and say, this was horrible for the UFC, and Conor McGregor is dead. They say that every few months when they check it out, and then they go away, and they come back. It's laughable to all of us who cover the sport on a daily basis.
Well, you must be laughing at me then, because I think that you're riding that momentum of Conor McGregor on the cover of Sports Illustrated. Then he loses. I know he goes back to his regular weight class, but you have that momentum. Rousey was the same thing. You had that momentum. You lose that momentum. She was invincible. McGregor seemed to be invincible. Then you lose that era of invincibility. So you lose the rematch with Ronda Rousey with Holly Holm. She'll beat Miesha Tate. So the
why do you lose the rematch though? Why do you lose the rematch? If she
you
beats
lose
Miesha Tate,
you lose the emphasis, the aura of that rematch of she took down Ronda Rousey. If that was the next fight, then you got people watching. Miesha Tate, that's not the, you lose a lot with that. She's beaten Miesha Tate. You expect her to beat Miesha Tate. Holly Holm took down Ronda Rousey. You lose that era of invincibility surrounding that. So, and Conor McGregor too. A little bit of the mystery was let out by that loss as well.
What about this word? You talk about invincibility, and I agree with you 100% to a degree. How about unpredictability? Isn't that, at the end of the day, why we watch sports, to see upsets emerge, see underdogs come from, rise from the ashes, to see people realize their dreams? Miesha Tate was 2 minutes away from probably never fighting for a UFC belt ever again. She was losing that fight. Nate Diaz had been historically in the shadow of his older brother, Nick Diaz. He finally gets the main event, a pay-per-view, and he steps up on the biggest stage possible, and he tells the world, I'm not surprised, and then an expletive after. That's beautiful to me. And now I want to see how Conor returns. I want to see how he rebounds. I want to see what happens with Holly Holm. When Holly Holm was knocked out as a boxer, she came back to win her belt again, then moved over to MMA and was an undefeated fighter up until Saturday night. To me, I love those stories. That makes athletes, more likable. That makes me want to, cover them more, root for them more. Invincibility, in my opinion, is not as interesting as unpredictability.
The real question, how would Jay Glazer do in the octagon? In a real fight?
Jay Glazer, a lot of people don't know this. I believe Jay Glazer has 2 fights under his belt. Jay Glazer is the real deal. He's walked the walk. These days I actually work with Jay, and, the fighters, the analysts, the ex-fighters, current fighters are around, and he likes to try to pretend like he can hold his own now. He wears these super, super tight shirts, tight jeans, and likes to flex. Like those guys who walk around, they're always flexing their pecs and their biceps. He's one of those guys. He looks like he weighs a solid 300 pounds, full muscle. But I just think at this age,
yeah.
And I think he's rounding 50 at this point, I think his better days are behind him.
I didn't know those were actual shirt. I thought that was paint. That was an actual. That it's that tight. It looks like he's got a painted on shirt. It's like a Sports Illustrated swimsuit model.
He wore one on Saturday before the fight. He called it his eczema shirt because there were these like white dots all over it. But it looked like it was actually painted on. You're 100% right. Very impressive physique. Take nothing away from him. But for a 50-year-old guy, I would suggest a little looser shirts.
Thank you, Ariel. Good to talk to you.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, Dan.
All right. Ariel Helwani, the 5-time MMA Journalist of the Year winner.